The air crackled with jubilant energy, a symphony of howling and laughter that echoed through the ancient forest. Torches cast flickering shadows upon the joyous faces of the Dark Moon Pack, their celebrations for the impending Pack Moon ceremony already underway. Young wolves, barely old enough to hunt, chased each other through the clearing, their fur gleaming under the nascent glow of the rising moon, their bodies poised for the exhilarating transformation that awaited them. Each bark, each playful nip, vibrated with the innate power of their shared heritage, a tangible force that bound them together. Yet, amidst this vibrant tapestry of belonging, one figure remained on the periphery, a solitary shadow against the brilliance. Alara watched them from beneath the gnarled branches of an ancient oak, her gentle gaze sweeping over the revelry. Her heart, a tender instrument, ached with a familiar bittersweet pang. She was a daughter of the Dark Moon, born into one of the most powerful werewolf packs in the unified kingdom, yet utterly distanced from its core identity. Unlike her peers, unlike every single member of her lineage for generations, Alara possessed no wolf form. Her blood thrummed with the ancient lineage, but the magic, the primal shift that defined her kind, had eluded her. She was a human among wolves, an anomaly, a constant, quiet reminder of a silent curse no one spoke of openly. Her peers, with their effortless grace and growing strength, saw her not with malice, but with a form of pity that was almost worse than scorn. They were kind in their way, offering her soft pelts to keep warm during the cold nights, sharing berries gathered from the forest's edge, but their kindness was punctuated by an unspoken understanding. She would never truly be one of them. Alara was inherently observant, a trait honed by years of watching from the sidelines. She noticed the way the elders' eyes would briefly linger on her during pack gatherings, a flicker of concern, perhaps even shame, before they quickly averted their gaze. She saw the longing in her parents' eyes, a profound sorrow they tried to mask with fierce love and protection. The annual Pack Moon ceremony was nearing, a pivotal event in their community, a time of renewal and demonstration of power. It was when young wolves, upon reaching their 18th year, would publicly undergo their first full shift under the full moon's potent influence, solidifying their place within the pack hierarchy. For Alara, who was 19 and had long since passed the age of expectation, it served only to amplify her isolation. Each successful transformation by a younger pack member was a stark confirmation of her perceived weakness, a deepening of the chasm between her and her kin. Her status as an outcast, though never explicitly stated, became more solid with every passing ceremony. She was gentle, yes, with a spirit that saw beauty in the smallest wildflower and felt empathy for an injured bird. But beneath that gentleness lay an unyielding yearning for acceptance, a desperate plea to belong. Before we delve deeper into Alara's fate, consider subscribing to our channel for more tales of courage and transformation. The weight of her inability to shift pressed down on Alara like an invisible cloak, growing heavier with each passing day. The celebration, once a distant hum, now felt like a spotlight illuminating her perceived inadequacy. Whispers, though never directed at her face, found their way to her ears through the rustling leaves and the glances of passing pack members. Still no shift. One young wolf would murmur to another, their voices barely above a whisper, yet sharp enough to pierce Alara's quiet composure. What will become of her? Her family, fiercely protective, bore the brunt of this unspoken judgment. Her mother, Lyra, often caught staring into the distance with a troubled expression, would quickly compose herself when Alara entered the room, forcing a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Her father, a respected warrior named Kale, would grip Alara's shoulder with unusual firmness, a silent apology for a burden neither of them understood. Their love was a sanctuary, but even sanctuaries could not fully block the biting winds of societal expectation. The shame, a dull ache in their collective hearts, was a constant companion, shadowing their every interaction with the rest of the pack. The elders, with their ancient wisdom and stern pronouncements, inadvertently deepened the rift. During communal meals, they would speak of the pack's strength, of the purity of their lineage, and the sacred bond with the wolf spirit. Their words, intended to inspire and unite, landed on Alara like subtle blows. A strong pack needs strong wolves, Elder Brennus would declare, his gaze sweeping over the gathered faces, momentarily pausing on Alara's corner. Any deviation from the true path weakens the whole. He never mentioned her by name, never pointed a finger, But the implication was clear, a cold reminder of her flaw broadcast to all. Each pronouncement, each subtle emphasis on the importance of the shift, was a reaffirmation of her outsider status, a quiet decree of her unworthiness in their eyes. Alara would shrink further into herself, her gentle spirit battling against the mounting pressure, trying to absorb the criticism without letting it shatter her fragile sense of self. Despite the crushing reality and the constant, subtle rejections, Alara harbored a secret. Deep within the secluded parts of the forest, under the cloak of twilight or the pre-dawn quiet, she would practice. She would stand before a smooth, polished rock, her reflection a wavering image in the dim light, and close her eyes. Every fiber of her being would strain, every muscle would tense, attempting to coax forth the transformation that eluded her. She'd imagine the fur sprouting, the bones shifting, the primal power rising. She'd focus intensely, mimicking the concentrated expression she'd seen on younger wolves attempting their first partial shifts. She pushed, she pleaded with her dormant wolf, her heart pounding with a mixture of desperate hope and profound longing. Hours would pass, sometimes ending in tears of frustration, sometimes in utter exhaustion, but never in success. Yet she persevered. This wasn't merely a childish fantasy. It was a deep-seated yearning for a life she felt unjustly denied. She longed to run with the pack, the wind in her fur, the earth thrumming beneath her paws. She yearned for the primal chase, the shared hunt, the silent communication that transcended words. She dreamed of the exhilaration of the full moon, the collective howl of her brethren echoing through the valley, and the powerful sense of belonging that came with it. Her senses were sharp, her knowledge of the forest profound, born from countless solitary wanderings where she observed what others, in their wolf-born certainty, often missed. She felt a connection to the wild, a primal echo within her soul, even if her body refused to follow. She knew with an unwavering certainty that there was a wolf inside her, a powerful spirit waiting to be unleashed. It was a truth she held onto, a secret flame that flickered against the encroaching darkness of doubt and societal pressure, fueling her solitary, hopeless practice sessions. She just needed to find the key, the single spark that would ignite the forgotten beast within. The kingdom buzzed with an electrifying announcement that rippled through every pack, reaching even the quiet corners of the Dark Moon territory. King Lyrius, the commanding and formidable leader of the unified werewolf kingdom, was to visit their pack for the upcoming moon ceremony. His reputation preceded him, a thunderous echo of power and unwavering authority that stretched across the lands. Stories painted him as a figure of immense strength, his stoic demeanor matched only by his unyielding resolve. He was a king who commanded respect, not merely through his title, but through his inherent, palpable force of will. His presence alone was set to quell dissent and inspire awe, a living legend among wolves. For Alara, this news brought a new chilling wave of anxiety. The king's arrival was not just a grand event. It was a magnifying glass placed over every aspect of their pack, every member under scrutiny. She imagined his piercing gaze assessing, judging, evaluating. Would her failure, her inability to shift, be seen as a blemish on the Dark Moon Pack's reputation? Would her family face further quiet censure from the most powerful alpha in all the lands? The thought sent a cold dread through her veins. He was known for his stringent adherence to tradition, to the ancient ways, and the inability to shift was an anomaly, a break in the sacred lineage that he might view with disdain. The fear of his judgment, of the potential implications for her beloved pack, weighed heavily on her young shoulders. She pictured herself shrinking even further into the shadows, hoping to become invisible amidst the grandeur. As the days dwindled towards the ceremony, a curious undercurrent of whispers began to circulate amongst the older pack members, hushed tones that spoke of ancient lore and prophecies long believed to be mere fables. Alara, with her keen observational skills, caught snippets of conversations that piqued her usually subdued curiosity. "They say the king's visit isn't just tradition," an elder woman murmured to another, her voice barely audible. "There's talk of a sign, a forgotten beast." Another would nod gravely, adding to the mystery, "And a unique Luna, one unlike any before." These fragmented phrases drifted like smoke, elusive yet potent, filling the air with an almost magical tension. A forgotten beast. The words resonated with Alara on a level she couldn't quite comprehend, stirring something deep within her, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor of recognition that she immediately dismissed as fanciful thinking. It was surely just old wives' tales, meant to entertain and perhaps instill a sense of mystical heritage in the younger generation. Yet, the persistent whispers, the almost reverent tones in which they were spoken, suggested something more. The elders, usually so grounded in the practicalities of pack life, seemed genuinely troubled, or perhaps genuinely hopeful. There was an air of anticipation, not just for the king's arrival, but for something far older, something tied to the very fabric of their existence. Elara tried to push these thoughts aside, focusing instead on her mundane duties, on the quiet practice sessions in the woods that still yielded no results. Her inability to connect with her inner wolf felt like a gaping chasm, a personal failure magnified by the approaching grand ceremony and the formidable presence of King Lyrius. What if these prophecies, these ancient tales, were somehow connected to her? The very idea was preposterous. She was Elara, the gentle outcast, the one who couldn't shift. How could she possibly be linked to a forgotten beast or a unique Luna? Yet, the possibility, however remote, planted a tiny seed of unease, a flicker of something akin to destiny, that nestled itself in her anxious heart, waiting for the king's arrival to either extinguish it or fan it into a raging fire. The air, already thick with anticipation, solidified into palpable reverence the moment King Lyrius's retinue swept into the Dark Moon territory. His entry was less an arrival and more a declaration, a silent assertion of power that resonated through the very earth. At the forefront, atop a magnificent black wolf, sat Lyrius himself, a figure carved from granite and shadowed by authority. His presence was commanding, an almost oppressive weight that settled over the gathering pack. His eyes, the color of twilight skies, were sharp and intelligent, missing nothing as they swept across the assembled faces. No forced smiles or nervous chatter escaped his immediate notice. He absorbed every detail, every subtle shift in posture, every flicker of emotion. The pack alpha, normally so formidable, seemed to shrink slightly in his presence, a testament to the king's inherent dominance. His gaze lingered briefly, curiously on Elara, who stood, as always, slightly apart from the main gathering, a small, still point in the swirling anxiety of her pack. It was a fleeting glance, perhaps no more than an acknowledgement of her unusual position, but it made her heart quicken with an unfamiliar mix of fear and a strange, potent curiosity. His eyes held an ancient wisdom, a depth that seemed to pierce through pretense, and Elara felt an inexplicable urge to look away, yet found herself unable to break the momentary connection. The king's survey was swift, thorough, a silent assessment of his subjects, and then he dismounted with an effortless grace that spoke of practiced power. The pack dynamics immediately shifted, becoming a kaleidoscope of eager faces and strained postures. Every movement, every word, every gesture was now performed with an almost desperate desire to impress the king. Younger wolves, normally boisterous, exhibited a newfound solemnity, their playfulness replaced by an almost rigid adherence to proper protocol. The alpha's mate, typically warm and welcoming, now fussed incessantly over every detail, her usual gentle demeanor frayed by the immense pressure. This collective performance, this heightened awareness of being judged by the highest authority, inadvertently amplified Elara's feelings of inadequacy. She was already an outsider, and now, under the king's magnifying gaze, her flaw felt grotesquely exposed. Each perfect bow, each confident display of pack unity, only served to highlight her inability to contribute in the way her peers could. The celebratory atmosphere of the moon ceremony had been replaced by a tense, almost suffocating formality. Despite the overwhelming pressure, the subtle jibes, and the crushing weight of her own perceived shortcomings, Elara maintained a quiet dignity. She stood observing the proceedings from the periphery, her gentle eyes taking in every nuance of the king's interactions, every reaction from her pack members. There was no bitterness in her gaze, only a profound sense of observation. She noticed the slight tension in the king's jaw when a young wolf stumbled during a ceremonial greeting, the almost imperceptible nod of approval when an elder spoke with particular wisdom. She was a silent chronicler of the scene, a mirror reflecting the hidden emotions of those around her. Her heart ached, not with self-pity, but with a deep longing to be part of the vibrant, unified whole she saw before her, even under the stress of the king's visit. She longed to feel the collective strength, the unshakable bond that connected every shifting wolf. Yet she also possessed an innate resilience, a quiet strength that had allowed her to endure years of unspoken judgment. She had learned to find solace in the small moments, in the rustle of leaves, the scent of pine, the silent wisdom of the ancient trees. These were her companions, her confidants, in a world that often felt too loud, too demanding, too wolfish for her human form. She was an anomaly, yes, but she was also a Lara, and she held on to that truth with tenacious grace, even as the Alpha King's powerful presence dominated their world. The peaceful demonstration of hunting skills, meant to entertain and impress the visiting Alpha King Lyrius, was abruptly shattered. A sudden piercing shriek echoed through the dense forest bordering the clearing, a sound of raw, uncontrolled aggression that sent a ripple of alarm through the assembled pack. It was swiftly followed by a crashing of underbrush, drawing all eyes to the tree line. A wild, rogue beast, larger and far more vicious than any typically encountered within their carefully guarded territory, burst forth. Its matted fur bristled, teeth bared in a snarl, eyes glinting with an unholy fury. It was clearly not an ordinary predator. There was a malevolent intelligence in its gaze, an unsettling ferocity that spoke of something dark and untamed. Panic, a primal ancient fear, erupted within the usually disciplined pack. The pack's initial response was a chaotic swirl of young eager wolves, fueled by adrenaline but lacking in true experience. They surged forward, a confused mass of shifting forms and bewildered growls, attempting to encircle the intruder. However, the rogue beast was too quick, too erratic, its movements a blur of snapping jaws and raking claws. It effortlessly dodged their uncoordinated attacks, lashing out with surprising speed, sending several younger wolves yelping and tumbling to the ground. Their efforts, though brave, were proving ineffectual. They were accustomed to controlled hunts, to predictable prey, and this creature was anything but. The Alpha King's guards, elite warriors themselves, moved to intercept, but even their practiced maneuver seemed hesitant against the sheer, unexpected brutality of the rogue. The air filled with snarls and the sickening thud of impact, a stark contrast to the earlier celebratory mood. The demonstration had devolved into a desperate struggle, showcasing not their strength, but their vulnerability. Alara, typically a quiet observer, felt a profound shift within her. The sight of the pack struggling, the raw terror in the younger wolf's eyes, ignited something deep inside her. A surge of instinct, fierce and undeniable, coursed through her veins. It was a primal urge to act, to protect, to join the fray, a feeling she had never experienced with such intensity. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a wild drumbeat echoing the chaos unfolding before her. Every fiber of her being screamed for her to do something, anything to help. She felt her muscles tense, a phantom ache of transformation echoing through her limbs, a desperate longing for the power that would allow her to intervene. Yet she remained rooted to the spot, paralyzed by her inability to shift. The frustration was a bitter taste in her mouth, a burning shame that consumed her. She was a human, weak and defenseless, amidst a battle of wolves. Her hands clenched into fists, nails digging into her palms, as she watched her fellow pack members flounder. Her heart cried out in silent protest, her mind raced, searching for an answer, a way to contribute, even without the strength of a wolf. She was aware of the Alpha King, a formidable presence even in the midst of the escalating danger, his eyes tracking the rogue's movements with intense focus. But her gaze was drawn to the struggling pack members, to the fear, to the very real threat. The ancient, dormant spark within her, usually a faint flicker, now pulsed with an insistent, desperate light demanding release. She yearned to bridge the chasm between her human form and the primal urge that roared within her, a silent beast fighting to break free. The rogue beast, a whirlwind of malice and feral power, seemed to sense the apex of authority, its malicious gaze bypassing the struggling warriors and fixing instead on the imposing figure of King Lyrius. With a terrifying snarl that ripped through the panicked air, it suddenly veered, abandoning the skirmish with the younger wolves. In a chilling, unexpected move, it sprang directly towards the Alpha King, who, momentarily focused on issuing commands and coordinating defenses, was caught off guard, a flicker of surprise crossing his usually impassive features. The beast's leap was swift, a blur of claws and teeth aimed directly at the king's throat, a direct challenge to the very heart of their leadership. A collective gasp rose from the terrified pack. In that split second, as time seemed to stretch and distort around the impending strike, Alara acted. There was no conscious thought, no deliberation, no fear. Only an innate, overwhelming protective instinct, honed by years of watching and caring, surged through her like a tidal wave. She saw the danger, the direct threat to the king, to the very symbol of their stability, and a primal, undeniable urge to shield him consumed her. Without a moment's hesitation, her body moved on its own accord, a blur of desperate motion. She threw herself forward, a fragile human shield, placing her own defenseless form directly in the path of the rabid beast, a desperate attempt to absorb the impact, to buy the king precious seconds. Her eyes, wide with a fierce, sudden determination, met the savage glint in the rogue's eyes just as its claws grazed her shoulder, a searing pain instantly blossoming through her. But the pain was instantly overshadowed by something far more profound, something utterly cataclysmic. As the beast's razor-sharp claws made contact, a surge of unimaginable power, dormant for centuries, erupted within Alara. It wasn't just a feeling. It was a physical manifestation, a violent, electrifying current that tore through every cell of her being. Her blood boiled, her bones groaned and shifted with a terrifying, agonizing speed, reshaping themselves with an audible crackle that silenced the entire clearing. Her skin stretched and tore, replaced by dense, shimmering fur the color of midnight, woven with streaks of starlight that pulsed with an ethereal glow. She didn't merely shift like the other wolves. This was no ordinary transformation. This was an awakening, a metamorphosis into something ancient, something forgotten, something of immense primal power. Her form expanded, growing to a colossal size, dwarfing even the largest pack warriors. Her muzzle elongated, teeth sharpening into formidable fangs, and her eyes, once soft and brown, now blazed with an inner fire, radiating an almost blinding golden light. Along her flanks, intricate, glowing markings like ancient runes flared into existence, pulsing with an otherworldly energy that illuminated the deepening twilight. The air around her crackled with raw, untamed magic, sending shivers down the spines of every wolf present. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath, bowing before the sheer force of her sudden, terrifying emergence. She was no longer Alara, the gentle, unshifting human. She was something magnificent, terrifying, a creature unlike any seen in generations, a massive, ancient wolf, a forgotten beast finally unleashed. The colossal, luminous form that was once Alara moved with a speed and ferocity that defied its immense size. The rogue beast, momentarily stunned by the sudden, blinding transformation, hesitated for only a fraction of a second. That was all it took. With a guttural roar that echoed through the stunned forest, the forgotten beast launched itself forward, not with the frenzied aggression of the rogue, but with a calculated, ancient power. Its massive paws, now equipped with claws like daggers forged from starlight, slammed down, pinning the snarling intruder to the earth with effortless dominance. The glowing markings along Alara's fur pulsed brighter, casting an otherworldly light on the scene. There was no prolonged struggle, no desperate fight. The rogue beast, despite its earlier savagery, was utterly outmatched. A whimpering yelp escaped its throat as the forgotten beast's jaw, wider than any wolf's, closed around its neck with an almost gentle, yet absolute finality. It wasn't an act of brute force, but of undeniable, inherent supremacy. In mere heartbeats the threat was neutralized, the rogue beast subdued, its earlier fury extinguished by a power it couldn't comprehend. The forest fell into an unnerving silence, broken only by the ragged breathing of the captivated pack. They stared, frozen in place, a mixture of awe, gut-wrenching fear, and utter disbelief etched onto every face. Alara, the gentle outcast, the unshifting human, had become a legend before their very eyes. King Lyrius, who had braced for the rogue's impact, now stood completely stunned, his earlier surprise replaced by a profound, almost reverent wonder. His piercing gaze, usually so unreadable, was wide with an emotion Alara had never seen there before. He watched the glowing beast, his mind racing, trying to reconcile the figure before him with the frail human who had thrown herself in harm's way. He felt the ancient power radiating from her, a raw, untamed magic that dwarfed anything he had ever encountered. It was immense, sacred, and terrifyingly beautiful. He recognized the sheer scale, the intricate, glowing patterns that hummed with a forgotten energy. This was no mere alpha shift, no peak of ordinary werewolf evolution. This was something else entirely, something woven into the very fabric of their oldest legends. An almost forgotten memory stirred within him, a whisper of lore passed down through generations of alphas, tales dismissed as myth, but now vividly brought to life. He sensed a profound, almost gravitational connection to this unique transformation, a ripple through the ancient bonds of their kind. As the forgotten beast stood triumphant over its vanquished foe, a tremor of recognition, slow but undeniable, began to spread through the elder members of the Dark Moon Pack. Their eyes, once filled with fear, now held a dawning realization, a quiet, almost fearful understanding. Elder Brennus, his face pale, slowly raised a trembling hand, his gaze fixed on Ilara's radiant form. "The signs, the markings," he whispered, his voice raspy with awe. "They match the ancient texts. The prophecy, it speaks of this." Another elder, a wizened female named Maeve, nodded gravely, her eyes suddenly filled with unshed tears. The forgotten beast, awakened when hope seemed lost. The first wolf's power. The words, once mere echoes of ancient lore, now resonated with undeniable truth. The prophecy, long dismissed as a fanciful myth to explain the inexplicable, was unfolding before them. Ilara, the ridiculed, the outcast, the one who couldn't shift, was not just a werewolf. She was the vessel of something far greater, something destined to emerge in a time of desperate need. The unique Luna, the forgotten beast, the one whose power lay dormant until a moment of true selflessness, had finally revealed herself. The whispers, the strange portents, the king's unexpected visit, all converged into a single breathtaking revelation. Ilara was the one. The realization sent a shiver through the entire pack, transforming their fear into a complex tapestry of reverence, apprehension, and an overwhelming, dawning hope for their future. The blinding light that had enveloped Ilara's transformed figure slowly began to recede, coalescing inward until the colossal form shimmered, wavered, and then painstakingly began to shrink. Her bones, which had so recently and violently reshaped themselves, now reversed the process, a dull ache replacing the earlier intense agony. The dense, starlight-infused fur receded, replaced by the familiar softness of her human skin, though it felt raw and strangely sensitive as if reborn. Her blazing golden eyes flickered, the intense light dimming, before settling back into their familiar shade of brown, albeit with a new, unsettling depth. She swayed on unsteady legs, the sheer physical and spiritual exertion of the transformation and its aftermath leaving her utterly depleted. Disorientation washed over her, a dizzying haze that blurred the edges of her vision. The roaring in her ears, the primal thunder of the forgotten beast, faded, replaced by the stunned silence of the forest. She struggled to keep her footing, grappling with the magnitude of what had just happened, a kaleidoscope of images flashing through her mind. The rogue beast's snarl, the king's momentary vulnerability, the surge of power, the effortless dominance, and then this overwhelming return to herself. She felt like a vessel that had contained a hurricane, now left empty and bruised. Around her, the pack remained frozen, their earlier fear and ridicule having completely dissolved, replaced by a profound, almost reverent confusion. Ilara was no longer the unshifting outcast, the burden, the source of quiet shame. She was an enigma, a living, breathing paradox. The gentle girl they had pitted had just manifested a power that eclipsed anything they had ever witnessed, a force that spoke of ancient gods and forgotten legends. Their faces, once etched with judgment, now displayed a mixture of awe, apprehension, and an almost desperate need for understanding. Whispers, far different from the mocking ones of before, began to circulate, hushed tones filled with wonder rather than scorn. She saw their gazes, no longer dismissive, but searching, scrutinizing, attempting to reconcile the Ilara they knew with the terrifying, magnificent beast they had just witnessed. She was no longer just Ilara. She was the forgotten beast, the catalyst of prophecy, and with that came a new kind of isolation, one born of sheer, unapproachable power. Before Ilara could even fully regain her balance, before the last vestiges of the transformation's energy had completely faded, King Lyrius was at her side. His movements were swift, decisive, imbued with the authority that defined him. He didn't approach with fear, but with a gaze that burned with an intense, calculated focus. His large hand, surprisingly gentle, settled on her arm, steadying her as her legs threatened to give way. The touch sent a jolt through Alara, a strange mix of comfort and an unsettling awareness of his formidable presence. He didn't question, he didn't demand explanations, not yet. His immediate actions were purely protective. With a stern, commanding glance that swept over the still stunned pack, he issued a low, resonant growl that silenced any nascent murmurs. "She is under my protection," he declared, his voice carrying the weight of his royal authority, leaving no room for doubt or challenge. He lifted Alara carefully, as if she were made of fragile glass, into his arms. Sensing the profound implications of her transformation and the potential threat it posed, not just from any lingering rogue elements, but from those who might seek to exploit or harm her, he moved her away from the immediate scene. Lyrius understood that such a monumental shift, such an awakening of ancient power, would not go unnoticed by the hidden forces that moved within their world. He recognized that Alara, in her current state, was not only exhausted but also a beacon, drawing attention both benevolent and malevolent. His eyes, though still reflecting a deep wonder, also held a fierce protectiveness. He knew, with an instinct born of generations of leadership, that this was just the beginning. The forgotten beast had awakened, and with it a new era had dawned, one that required the utmost vigilance and strength. He would shield her, guide her, and uncover the truth behind her extraordinary origin. The Alpha King, Lyrius, moved with a quiet, purposeful intensity that Alara found both unnerving and profoundly reassuring. He had taken her away from the stunned pack, settling her in the secluded, ancient chambers reserved only for the highest-ranking pack members or honored guests. Here, surrounded by the weight of centuries of tradition, he began his meticulous research, poring over ancient texts and brittle scrolls that smelled of dust and forgotten magic. His fingers, surprisingly delicate for such a powerful warrior, traced the faded symbols and cryptic writings, searching for answers, for understanding. Through endless hours of diligent study, punctuated by his keen observations of Alara, he began to piece together the fragmented lore. The beast that had erupted from Alara was not merely a rare form of werewolf. It was the sacred primal essence of the first wolves, the original shapeshifters who had walked the earth when the world was young and magic flowed freely. This dormant power, believed lost to time, was meant to reawaken only in times of great existential need, a cosmic failsafe designed to protect their kind when all other hope had dwindled. He learned that her unique glowing markings were the sigils of creation, ancient symbols of balance and raw, untamed power. Alara was not a flaw. She was a miracle, a living link to their most ancient origins. Alara, however, struggled deeply to comprehend the magnitude of her new identity. The sudden shift from outcast to prophesied savior was a dizzying, disorienting experience. She felt like two distinct beings trapped within one body. The gentle, insecure Alara who watched wildflowers and longed for acceptance, and the terrifying, magnificent creature that had effortlessly subdued a rogue beast. The power, when she recalled it, was an almost overwhelming force, a roaring torrent that threatened to consume her. She grappled with the sheer weight of the prophecy, the unspoken expectations now resting upon her shoulders. Every glance from a pack member, now filled with reverence rather than pity, felt like a heavy cloak. She still felt like an outsider, perhaps even more so now, for who could truly understand or relate to such a unique transformation? The isolation she had known for so long had not vanished, it had merely shifted, growing wider and deeper, separating her not by flaw, but by an almost divine uniqueness and terrifying potential. Yet, amidst her confusion and burgeoning isolation, an unexpected connection began to forge between her and Lyrius. He saw beyond her initial shyness, beyond the overwhelming power she possessed, directly into her gentle, courageous spirit. He did not treat her as a weapon to be wielded or a prophecy to be fulfilled, but as a being of immense, complex worth. He spent hours with her, not just explaining the ancient texts, but listening to her fears, her anxieties, her bewildered questions about the roaring beast within. He admired her courage, not just for throwing herself in front of him, but for holding on to her inherent goodness despite years of silent ridicule. He sensed the deep, powerful spirit within her, a spirit that had endured neglect and misunderstanding, yet had emerged unbroken. Their conversations, initially formal and guarded, slowly evolved into something more profound. He spoke of the heavy mantle of leadership, the relentless pressure of protecting an entire kingdom, and the loneliness that often accompanied such responsibility. Alara, in turn, shared her quiet observations of the pack, her innate empathy for their struggles, her surprising insights into their individual needs. He found himself drawn to her unwavering kindness, her lack of pretense, her capacity for unconditional love, qualities often scarce in the hierarchy of power. He saw how the beast within her, though formidable, was intrinsically tied to her protective nature, reacting aggressively only when those she cared for were threatened. It wasn't a destructive force but a shield, a guardian. Lyrius's respect for Alara deepened with each passing day. He recognized that her unique ability to embody the forgotten beast was not just a symbol of ancient power, but a testament to her pure heart, her selflessness, and her inherent connection to the foundational spirit of their kind. He watched her, not as his subject, but as an equal, perhaps even as a guide to a path he himself had not yet fully comprehended. The Alpha King, usually stoic and unyielding, found himself softening, a flicker of warmth igniting within his guarded heart. He began to see her not just as the key to a prophecy, but as a remarkable individual, a woman whose true strength lay not just in her ability to transform, but in the unwavering grace of her human spirit. This burgeoning connection, unspoken yet palpable, began to lay the groundwork for something far greater than political alliance or prophetic duty. It was the quiet blossoming of a bond that transcended their roles, a mutual understanding rooted in respect, admiration, and a growing undeniable fascination. The Alpha King, usually stoic and unyielding, found himself softening, a flicker of warmth igniting within his guarded heart. He began to see her not just as the key to a prophecy, but as a remarkable individual, a woman whose true strength lay not just in her ability to transform, but in the unwavering grace of her human spirit. This burgeoning connection, unspoken yet palpable, began to lay the groundwork for something far greater than political alliance or prophetic duty. It was the quiet blossoming of a bond that transcended their roles, a mutual understanding rooted in respect, admiration, and a growing undeniable fascination. Alara's days quickly settled into a new, demanding rhythm, a stark contrast to her previous life of quiet observation. Under the direct tutelage of King Lyrius and a select few of the wisest elders who possessed fragmented knowledge of the first wolves, she began the arduous process of learning to control her formidable new form. The training was relentless, often frustrating. Lyrius himself would guide her through meditations, teaching her to quiet the human mind and embrace the primal roar of the beast within, to find the delicate balance between instinct and conscious control. They practiced in secluded clearings, far from prying eyes, where Alara would attempt to shift, sometimes gracefully, but often with clumsy raw power, struggling to command the immense strength that surged through her. She learned to focus the glowing energy that manifested in her beast form, to call upon its protective aura, to manage the sheer physical output without exhausting herself completely. There were days of triumph when she would execute a perfect controlled shift, her glowing markings flaring in obedience. But there were also days of profound discouragement, when the beast felt too wild, too independent, threatening to overwhelm her human self, leaving her trembling and disoriented. Lyrius, ever patient, ever watchful, was her constant anchor, guiding her back from the precipice of desperation, reminding her of the courage she possessed. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the pack's perception of Alara continued its dramatic shift. The initial awe and fear began to evolve into a grudging respect, then genuine admiration, and finally a quiet, collective acceptance. They watched from a respectful distance as she trained, witnessing the sheer power of her forgotten beast form, but also the arduous dedication she put into mastering it. The younger wolves who once teased her, now looked upon her with wide-eyed wonder, seeing her not as a burden, but as a protector, a living legend unique among them. The elders who had once subtly condemned her, now sought her quiet wisdom, recognizing the ancient spirit that resonated within her. She was no longer just the outsider. She was a symbol of their resilience, a testament to the unexpected paths of destiny. The pack, once fractured by her perceived weakness, was now united in their awe and their growing sense of pride in her. They saw her painstaking efforts to understand and control the beast, and they began to truly see her for the first time. Just as Alara began to find a semblance of control, and the pack started to heal its internal divisions, an ominous shadow began to creep across the unified werewolf kingdom. News, initially vague whispers carried on the wind, soon crystallized into grim reports of a rising darkness, threatening the delicate balance they had so carefully maintained. Messengers, their matted with dust and fear, arrived from distant territories, bringing tales of strange phenomena, of lands shrouded in unnatural gloom, of skirmishes with unknown malevolent forces. Lyrius, ever vigilant, sensed a growing threat that transcended mere border disputes or rogue factions. This was something ancient, something insidious, a shadowy force that sought to unravel the very fabric of their existence. It demanded the formidable power of the forgotten beast, a power now embodied by Alara, a power that had awakened just in time to face the gravest challenge their kingdom had ever known. The training had prepared her for this. Now she would truly be tested. The demanding rhythm of training and the ominous shadow of an encroaching darkness were powerful forces, but amidst them, a different kind of strength was quietly blossoming. Between Alara and Lyrius, a profound unspoken bond began to weave itself, intricate and resilient. It grew not from shared lineage or ancient prophecy alone, but from countless hours spent in quiet contemplation, in the raw honesty of battle preparation, and in the vulnerable moments of frustration and triumph. He saw past the glowing markings and the immense power to the gentle, courageous woman beneath, while she, in turn, saw past the formidable Alpha King to the burdened leader, the man who carried the weight of an entire kingdom on his broad shoulders. Their discussions often started with strategy or ancient lore, but inevitably drifted to deeper, more personal revelations. He shared his fears for his people, the relentless pressure of command, and the personal sacrifices demanded by his crown. Alara, in turn, confided her anxieties about the beast, the sheer, untamed power that threatened to consume her, and the lingering echoes of her past isolation. This wasn't merely respect between a mentor and his charge. It was an undeniable connection, a magnetic pull that resonated in the space between them, a silent understanding that transcended words. It was in the steady hand he offered when her shifts faltered, the encouraging glint in his eyes when she finally mastered a new control, and the shared glances across a crowded council chamber that spoke volumes without a single syllable uttered. Through the rigorous training and Lyrius's unwavering belief, Alara's confidence began to bloom slowly but surely. She had always been observant, gentle, and quietly resilient, but now a fierce inner light began to shine. She learned to embrace her power, not as a curse or a burden, but as an intrinsic part of herself, a gift bestowed upon her for a crucial purpose. The forgotten beast, once a terrifying alien entity, became less of a separate being and more of an extension of her own will, an amplifier of her deepest instincts. She discovered that her uniqueness, her difference from the other wolves, was not a weakness but her greatest asset, the very source of the extraordinary strength needed to face the looming threat. The glowing markings, once symbols of her otherness, now radiated a quiet pride, a testament to her journey of transformation and acceptance. She moved with a newfound grace, a blend of her inherent gentleness and the raw power she now commanded. The shy glances that once plagued her were replaced by a steady, unwavering gaze that met the eyes of even the most seasoned warriors. She understood that she was not merely fulfilling a prophecy. She was forging her own destiny, guided by her heart and empowered by her awakened spirit. As the reports of the encroaching darkness grew more frequent and more dire, the entire kingdom began to mobilize. The initial skirmishes, confined to distant borders, were a prelude to something far more significant. Lyrius, with Alara standing by his side, convened war councils drawing together the alpha leaders from every pack. The mood was grim but resolute. Resources were pooled, strategies debated, and ancient defenses reactivated. Carpenters worked tirelessly, reinforcing fortifications, while blacksmiths hammered out new weapons. Scouts crisscrossed the land, their reports painting an increasingly bleak picture. Training exercises intensified, the howls of the warriors echoing through the night as they prepared for a conflict of unprecedented scale. Alara, no longer on the periphery, was at the heart of these preparations. Her unique abilities, her profound connection to the forgotten beast, made her an invaluable asset, a critical element in every strategic discussion. Lyrius trusted her instincts, often consulting her on the flow of energy in the land, the subtle shifts the darkness caused. The kingdom braced itself, a unified force preparing for a war that threatened to consume them all. The kingdom braced itself, a unified force preparing for a war that threatened to consume them all. The shadowy force, which had initially presented itself as a series of isolated skirmishes and growing unrest, soon revealed its true, insidious nature. This was no mere rogue faction or opportunistic band of exiled wolves seeking to reclaim lost territory. The encroaching darkness was, in fact, an ancient enemy, a sect of corrupt magic users long thought to have been vanquished and relegated to the dusty pages of forgotten history. They were necromancers and dark sorcerers, practitioners of forbidden arts who sought to destabilize the very balance of the werewolf kingdom, not for power alone, but for a twisted desire to see chaos reign. Their magic, fueled by shadow and fear, perverted the natural order, turning once vibrant lands into desolate wastes and twisting the minds of weaker beings to do their bidding. Their resurgence sent a shiver of dread through even the most seasoned warriors, for unlike physical foes, dark magic was unpredictable, insidious, and capable of inflicting damage far beyond the battlefield. They didn't just attack bodies, they attacked spirits. As the true nature of the threat became clear, the first major skirmishes erupted, testing the freshly sharpened defenses and the newfound unity of the kingdom. These were not mere border patrols clashing. These were brutal, desperate engagements that pushed the packs to their limits. A northern outpost, once a bastion of peace, was besieged by reanimated corpses and shadowy constructs, forcing the warriors to fight against foes who felt no pain and knew no fear. In the eastern forests, ancient trees withered and died overnight, their life force drained by dark rituals, leaving behind an eerie, corrupted landscape that pulsed with malevolent energy. Alara, now more confident in her control, was thrust into the heart of these battles. In her forgotten beast form, she proved to be a formidable, almost unstoppable asset. Her luminous presence, a beacon against the encroaching gloom, not only repelled the shadowy constructs but also seemed to cleanse the corrupted lands, her ancient power a direct counter to the dark magic. She moved with devastating efficiency, her roars shaking the very foundations of the earth, her glowing claws tearing through their ethereal enemies, her boundless energy seemingly inexhaustible. She fought not with savage fury, but with a primal protective instinct that made her an embodiment of pure, unyielding light against the suffocating darkness. During these increasingly desperate engagements, Lyrius's unwavering support for Alara became a constant, visible anchor. He fought alongside her, a fierce protective presence flanking her colossal form, his own shifts into wolf form a blur of speed and power as he defended her flanks from the more corporeal threats that tried to exploit her moments of focus. He offered not just physical protection, but also strategic counsel, his voice a steady rumble in her ear, guiding her through the chaos of battle. He understood the nuances of the battlefield, the subtle shifts in enemy tactics, and his experience complemented her raw, elemental power perfectly. When the beast within Alara threatened to overwhelm her human consciousness, Lyrius would be there, a grounding presence, his touch or a low growl a calming reminder of her identity, her purpose. He trusted her completely, implicitly, a trust that radiated outwards to the other pack members, solidifying their own faith in their new champion. Their developing relationship, once a quiet, unspoken understanding, deepened exponentially in the crucible of war. It was forged in shared danger, in mutual reliance, in the absolute certainty that they stood together, two halves of a formidable whole. The battlefield might have been a place of terror for many, but for Alara and Lyrius, it was also where their bond, already powerful, transformed into something unbreakable, an undeniable force that promised to become the very foundation of their kingdom's survival, and a future they were now fiercely determined to build together. He understood the nuances of the battlefield, the subtle shifts in enemy tactics, and his experience complemented her raw, elemental power perfectly. When the beast within Alara threatened to overwhelm her human consciousness, Lyrius would be there, a grounding presence, his touch or a low growl a calming reminder of her identity, her purpose. He trusted her completely, implicitly, a trust that radiated outwards to the other pack members, solidifying their own faith in their new champion. Their developing relationship, once a quiet, unspoken. Understanding deepened exponentially in the crucible of war. It was forged in shared danger, in mutual reliance, in the absolute certainty that they stood together, two halves of a formidable whole. The battlefield might have been a place of terror for many, but for Alara and Lyrius, it was also where their bond, already powerful, transformed into something unbreakable, an undeniable force that promised to become the very foundation of their kingdom's survival, and a future they were now fiercely determined to build together. The skirmishes, while fierce and demanding, were mere preludes. Intelligence gathered by the swiftest scouts, coupled with Lyrius's innate sense of impending doom, confirmed the worst fears. The ancient enemy was preparing for a decisive strike. Their target was the heart of the kingdom itself, the ancient settlement where the Alpha King's ancestral hall stood, a nexus of power and tradition. The stakes had never been higher. Failure meant not just defeat, but the complete unraveling of their society, the corruption of their lands, and the enslavement of their people to a dark, malevolent will. Every warrior, every elder, every innocent child understood the gravity of the looming confrontation. The air was thick with a heavy, pervasive tension, a silent countdown to the inevitable. Alara felt the immense weight of her role settle upon her shoulders like a physical burden. Her pre-battle anxieties were a tempest within her soul. Though she had faced the enemy in her forgotten beast form, the thought of this final, all-encompassing battle was terrifying. She worried for her pack, for the vulnerable ones who relied on their protection, for the young wolves whose lives were only just beginning. Fear, a cold, unwelcome guest, gnawed at the edges of her resolve. Yet, intertwined with this fear was a burning determination, a fierce, protective fire that stemmed from her deep love for her people. More profoundly, her growing affection for Lyrius fueled an unwavering resolve. She would not allow this darkness to touch him, to harm the man who had seen beyond her perceived flaws, who had guided her, and who had awakened the true strength within her. His courage was infectious, his belief in her a powerful anchor. On the eve of the final battle, amidst the frantic preparations and the somber quiet of the military camp, Alara found herself drawn to Lyrius. The moon, a thin crescent in the ink-black sky, cast long dancing shadows, deepening the sense of foreboding. He stood alone, gazing out over the assembled warriors, his posture regal, yet etched with the burden of leadership. Alara approached him, her steps soft, almost hesitant. He turned, his twilight eyes meeting hers, and in that shared glance, a tender, unspoken moment bloomed between them. No words were needed. The depth of their feelings, forged in shared struggle and mutual respect, was palpable, a silent current flowing between their souls. He reached out, his large hand gently clasping hers, his thumb tracing slow, reassuring circles on her skin. The simple touch was an anchor, a promise of steadfastness in the face of the storm. In his eyes she saw not just the determination of a king, but the vulnerable, protective gaze of the man she had come to cherish. Her heart swelled with a mix of fear and an exhilarating, profound love. She squeezed his hand in return, a silent vow of her own. The perilous path ahead loomed, dark and uncertain, but in that shared moment, a fragile hope ignited. They stood together, two powerful beings, one a king by birthright, the other a queen by destiny, united against the encroaching darkness, their unspoken bond a testament to the strength that lay not just in raw power, but in unwavering connection. An absolute trust. This love, this fierce protectiveness they felt for each other, became their most potent weapon, a burning ember in the encroaching gloom. The final battle erupted with a ferocity that tore through the night, a cataclysmic clash between light and shadow. The ancient enemy, bolstered by their dark magic, unleashed a torrent of malevolent energy that threatened to engulf the werewolf forces. Black tendrils of corrupted magic snaked across the battlefield, draining the vitality from the land and sowing despair in the hearts of the warriors. Screams mingled with roars, the metallic clang of steel on steel was drowned out by the sinister incantations of the dark sorcerers. Lyrius, a whirlwind of silver fur and snarling fury, fought with a desperate, kingly valor, his leadership unwavering even as the enemy's numbers seemed endless. Yet, despite their courage and skill, the werewolf lines began to falter under the sheer, oppressive weight of the dark magic. The air grew heavy, thick with despair, and the light of the moon seemed to dim, suffocated by the encroaching gloom. The dark magic users, their eyes burning with fanaticism, began to conjure a massive, swirling vortex of shadow, a portal meant to unleash even greater, more monstrous entities upon the beleaguered kingdom. Hope, a fragile flame, flickered dangerously, threatening to be extinguished. Alara knew this was the moment. She felt the despair of her pack, the agonizing struggle of Lyrius, the creeping tendrils of fear trying to constrict her own heart. But deeper than the fear, stronger than the doubt, was the fierce, unyielding love she held for them all. The bond forged with Lyrius, the acceptance from her pack, the understanding that she was no longer an outcast but a vital part of this collective, transformed her anxiety into a reservoir of raw, potent determination. She met Lyrius's desperate gaze across the chaotic battlefield, and in that shared look, an unspoken command passed between them. He nodded, a grim acknowledgement of the impossible task before her, and a flicker of unwavering trust. With a roar that transcended mere sound, a primal bellow that seemed to rip the very fabric of reality, Alara unleashed the full, raw power of the forgotten beast. This was no mere shift. This was an ultimate transformation, a complete and total surrender to the ancient power within. Her form swelled, growing even larger than before, radiating a pure, incandescent light that tore through the suffocating darkness like a nova. The glowing markings on her fur no longer just pulsed. They blazed with an almost blinding intensity, searing away the shadows around her. Her eyes, now twin suns of golden energy, locked onto the swirling vortex of dark magic, the source of their enemy's power. A shimmering aura of pure light erupted from her, pushing back the encroaching gloom, cauterizing the tendrils of corruption that clawed at the land. The very air crackled with her unleashed power, a symphony of creation and destruction. The ground beneath her titanic paws trembled, and an ancient, forgotten magic flowed from her, reconnecting the severed lines of life energy. The effect was instantaneous and devastating to the enemy. The immense wave of pure light and ancient magic emanating from Alara collided with the dark vortex, shattering its oppressive force. The shadowy creatures attempting to emerge from the portal recoiled, shrieking in agony as the light burned them away. The dark sorcerers, their incantations interrupted, their power source fractured, reeled back, their eyes wide with terror as their malevolent magic recoiled upon them. Their carefully constructed spells, their intricate webs of darkness, unraveled under the sheer unbridled force of Alara's awakened power. The ground that had been corrupted began to heal, the sickly gray receding before the vibrant green of renewed life. The air, once heavy with dread, cleared, filled with the clean scent of ozone and the undeniable presence of raw, untamed nature. This was the turning point. With their dark magic broken, their source of power shattered, the ancient enemy's forces crumbled. The shadowy constructs dissolved into nothingness, their ethereal forms unable to withstand the overwhelming light. The reanimated corpses, no longer fueled by dark necromancy, collapsed into lifeless dust. The enemy warriors, stripped of their magical advantage and terrified by the raw power they faced, broke ranks, their fanaticism replaced by a desperate, panicked flight. The werewolf army, reinvigorated by Alara's heroic act and the sudden shift in the battle's tide, surged forward with renewed vigor, their howls now echoing with triumph rather than despair. Lyrius, witnessing the incredible display, felt a surge of pride and love that was almost as powerful as the light Alara radiated. The tide had turned, the darkness was receding, and peace, a hard-won peace, was finally within their grasp, all thanks to the forgotten beast and the brave heart that wielded its power. The tide had definitively turned. The darkness recoiled, leaving behind a battlefield scarred but not broken, and peace, a hard-won, fragile peace, finally descended upon the beleaguered kingdom. The dark forces, stripped of their menacing magic and their leadership in disarray, scattered like chaff in a storm. Those who did not flee were swiftly subdued by the reinvigorated werewolf army, their morale soaring on the wings of Alara's extraordinary display of power. Exhausted but triumphant, Alara slowly allowed the radiant light of the forgotten beast to recede, her massive form gently shrinking until she stood once more in her human form, though now imbued with an undeniable aura of power and grace. Her limbs ached, a deep, pervasive weariness settling into her bones, but her spirit soared. Cheers erupted from the werewolf ranks, not just for the victory, but for her, their unlikely hero. They hailed her, their voices hoarse with emotion, no longer a timid outcast, but the saving grace, the living embodiment of an ancient prophecy. Lyrius, his own powerful wolf form still shimmering with the lingering adrenaline of battle, was the first to reach her. He shifted back to his human self, his eyes, usually so stoic, now filled with an overwhelming blend of relief, admiration, and a profound, undeniable love. He knelt before her, not in deference to her power, but in a gesture so deeply personal, so utterly sincere, that every wolf present understood the magnitude of the moment. He took her hands in his gaze unwavering, acknowledging her not just as the powerful forgotten beast, but as the woman who had saved them all, the woman who had captivated his heart. "Alara," he began, his voice a low rumble, resonant with emotion that vibrated through the hushed crowd. "You have not only saved our kingdom but awakened its true spirit. You are the embodiment of light, courage, and ancient power. More than that, you are the heart that beats at the center of our future." He rose, pulling her gently to her feet, and in front of his entire kingdom, before the triumphant pack, Lyrius formally accepted Alara as his Luna. It was a declaration that transcended political alliance or strategic partnership. It was a deeply personal spiritual union. "You are my mate, my equal, my queen, and my revered leader," he pronounced, his voice ringing with absolute conviction. "Together, we will usher in an era of unparalleled strength and peace." A wave of acceptance and joyous howls swept through the pack. The Luna of the Alpha King, a figure traditionally chosen for strength and lineage, was now Alara, the once unshifting gentle girl who had become something far greater than anyone could have imagined. Her forgotten beast power, once a source of fear and isolation, was now fully integrated into her being, a part of her essence, a source of unwavering strength that benefited all. She stood beside Lyrius, a symbol of unity and strength, their hands clasped, their eyes meeting in a silent promise of a shared future. The scars of battle would heal, the lands would recover, and the memory of the darkness would fade, but the legend of Alara, the girl who couldn't shift until she saved a kingdom, would live on, woven into the very fabric of their history. The future of the werewolf kingdom, once hanging by a thread, now shone brightly, guided by the light of the forgotten beast and the unwavering bond of its king and Luna. Their reign would be marked by an unprecedented harmony, a testament to the fact that true power lay not in conformity, but in the unique strength of an awakened spirit, and the courage to embrace one's destiny, however unexpected. If Alara's journey resonated with you, if her courage and transformation ignited a spark in your own spirit, consider subscribing and joining our pack for more epic tales of heroism, love, and unexpected destinies. And don't forget to check out our next video for another powerful story that reminds us all that true strength often lies where we least expect it.